Hello everybody, it's Jansaurus here, and we like to focus on budget Magic the Gathering, and today I'm going to bring you a budget Hinata Dawn Crowned Commander deck. So, Hinata Dawn Crown is a Jeskai commander with Flying Trample. Spells you cast cost one less to cast for each target, and spells your opponent cast cost one more to cast for each target. So not only does Hinata tax your opponent for every creature that they target or any permanent that they target, honestly, it also decreases your mana cost to really do anything if you build your deck properly. So Hinata Dawn Crown can be built in a variety of different ways as long as you have spells that target. Hinata's going to give you some benefit, but today's deck we're going to definitely maximize how much Hinata can save you mana wise. You could build Hinata as a taxing commander, but I'm not really the biggest fan of that kind of play style, so we're just going to go with the typical fun, discount our stuff as much as we can, and honestly you can do some really insane stuff with Hinata. That being said, let's get into it. We're going to start off with our ramped. We're going to have Burnished Heart. You can pay 3, sacrifice Burnished Heart, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Next up we have Storm Kiln Artist. It gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. This is going to be great early game, and then late game, worst case scenario, you have a 15-2 beat stick to hit someone with. This is mostly here for like the early to mid game ramp that we'll need to kind of really go off on some of our spells. Next up is Arcane Signet. Tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Commander Sphere, the exact same thing, except it also has a sacrifice command sphere to draw a card in case you really need to the late game. Elementalist Palette. Whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, put 2 charge counters on Elementalist Palette. Then you can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and then you can tap to add a colorless for each charge counter on Elementalist Palette. Spend this mana only to cost spells that contain X in its cost. I believe there is at least 10 X spells in this deck. It seems like a lot, but with Hinata it becomes insane. I'll show you at a later point. But Elementalist Palette can actually be a very, how should I say, a very efficient mana rock come late game. Jeskai Banner. Add any of the Jeskai colors. You can also pay 1 of each of the Jeskai colors to draw a card. Rugrin Crystal, sorry on the pronunciation on that one, can tap to add any of the Jeskai color, but you can also cycle it instead of sacrificing it for a card later on. Star Compass enters the battlefield tap, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color that a basic land you control produce. We're going to have plenty of basic lands in here, so that should not be an issue. We're going to go into our card draw. So Decoy Gambit. For each opponent, choose up to 1 target creature that player controls, then return that creature to its owner's hand unless its controller has you draw a card. More than likely, they're going to just give you the card draw. There are a few instances where that might not happen. And again, we're choosing 3 targets, so this is a 1 mana spell for us. Disorder in the Court, X, white, blue. Exile X target creatures, then investigate X times, then return the exiled creatures to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So Disorder in the Court is a very unique spell. Not only does it let you investigate a ton of times for this deck in particular, but you can also use it defensively to protect your board, or offensively to get in a free alpha strike. And with Hinata, the X is literally irrelevant. You can just pick as many creatures that you have or the opponent has for absolutely free with Hinata's cost reduction. Magma Opus deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. You tap 2 target permanents, and then you create a 4/4 blue-red elemental creature token, and then you draw 2 cards. You can also pay any of the Prismari color combinations to discard Magma Opus, create a treasure token. So, at maximum, you are paying 3 CMC for this card, because you target at least one thing for the damage, then you can target 2 other things for the tapping, and then you draw 2 cards, you tap 2 targets, you deal 4 damage, and you get a 4/4 elemental token, all for 3 CMC. Absolutely crazy amount of value off of this one card, and that is the most you can pay. You more than likely can also just, because you choose how to distribute the damage, you might as well just throw in another target and make it a 2 CMC card. Opt. Just scry, draw a card, just a really good, efficient draw spell. Sublime Epiphany. I had a hard time choosing where to put this card because it just does so much for you. Counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and target player draws a card. So, target player draws a card, that's going to be you, more than likely. There's 1. Target creature you control, there's 2. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, there's 3. And then you're either countering a spell and or countering a targeted, activated, or triggered ability. So you're paying all this, you're targeting so much that this is, again, a 2 CMC card for that much advantage. It's just absolutely bonkers what you can do with this card. Whirlwind of Thought. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card. Just a really, really good draw engine for this deck because we're playing a lot of non-creature spells. Deep Analysis. Target player draws 2 cards. This is a 3 CMC draw 2 card. But later on in the game, you can pay for a flashback and then get a single blue mana gets you 2 cards, and you have to pay 3 life, which is not that big of a deal in this deck. Open into Wonder. X target creatures can't be blocked this turn, and until end of turn, those creatures gain whenever this creature deals a combat damage to a player. Draw a card. Number 1, a really good alpha tool or alpha strike card for this deck, and also just the amount of card draw that you can draw off of this one card is absolutely insane. Archmage Emeritus. Whenever you cast a spell or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Just a really good draw engine in this deck again. Storm Chaser Drake, flying. Whenever Storm Chaser Drake becomes the target of a spell you control, draw a card. I really wish this card did not have the words you control, just because then a little bit of removal would just give you that much more benefit off of it. But I understand why they did it. And a lot of our X spells, we can target Storm Chaser Drake and then choose not to actually hurt it or disadvantage it in any way. So we can get away with drawing an extra card or 2 throughout the game doing that way as well. Witness the Future is kind of a nuts card for this. So you target a player and then target 4 cards from their graveyard and put them back into the library. Then you look at the top 4 cards of your library, put one of those cards in your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. All that being said, 1 CMC is what the spell is going to end up being. Instant, or not instant graveyard hate, but you can really mess with someone's graveyard setup if they have a Moldrova deck, for example, because that's a super common one. You can really mess up their graveyard setup and mess up how much they've the key combo pieces or anything that is in their deck. You can just shuffle that right back in and not have to worry about it. And then you get a card out of the top 4 of your library, whichever suits your needs for that instance. Just a really good card ends up being 1 CMC. Alright, we're going to go into some of our Spellslinger strategies because we're tossing a ton of spells at people. Metallurgic Summonings. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. And you can pay 3 blue, exile Metallurgic Summonings, return all instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only if you control 6 or more artifacts. We will have to depend on Metallurgic Summonings to actually get to that artifact count. More than likely, we don't run that many artifacts, surprisingly, in this deck. Sorcerer class. Whenever Sorcerer class enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. You can pay blue and a red to level it up to creatures you control have tap, add blue or red. Spend this mana only to cast instant or sorcery spells or to gain a class level. And then the last one is arguably the most important one here, is 3 blue and a red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, that spell damages or deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of instant and sorcery spells you've cast this turn. So our spells kind of float from the extremely expensive, but with Hinata they're medium priced, to being dirt cheap. So we can just fling a lot of spells in a turn, and it gets absolutely nuts with this card depending on the circumstances. It's just a really good card. Just so that little bit of extra ping damage can add up over time, especially when we get our other pinging effects on the field. And more than likely, we're going to be either winning through that, alpha striking, or some really big fun burn spells is our game plan with this deck. So Sunburn's Invocation, enough of a side tangent. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value X or less from among those cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I will go into Sunbird's Invocation and Metallurgic Summonings mana values just because they're kind of weird with this deck, but I'll explain it the best I can at a later point. Swarm Intelligence. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for that copy. Just a really great card for any Spellslinger deck. Archaeomancer. Enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Decal Fractal Theorist has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token and put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is that spell's mana value. Again, I'll get into that in the future. And then you can also pay 3 and a blue, and target creature token can't be blocked this turn. That can be huge with this card, just saying. Or with Metallurgic Summonings, to be honest with you. Electrostatic Field has Defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Firebrand Archer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Firebrand Archer deals 1 damage to each opponent. Again, just a little ping effects, adds up over time. Gutter Snipe. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, deals 2 damage to each opponent. Kessig Flame Breather is a non-creature spell specifically, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Mana Form Hellkite has flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a XX red dragon illusion creature token with flying and haste, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. A temporary body just to get in a little bit extra damage, just top notch for this deck. Talrand Sky Summoner. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue drake creature token with flying. People hate this card because of what it has done to Commander. So they might remove this before your Hinata. That is a terrible mistake in this deck. But just saying, people really hate this card for what it's done to Commander and just having such a mono blue counter everything strategy. Just pointing that out there. Smoldering Egg has Defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a number of Ember counters on Smoldering Egg equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. If Smoldering Egg has 7 or more Ember counters on it, remove them and transfer Smoldering Egg. It turns into Ashmouth Dragon, has flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to any target. One thing I do want to point out, if you are using Hinata's cost reduction ability, it will make it a little bit harder to flip Smoldering Egg to Ashmouth Dragon, but you will get there, and when you do, this card really just goes off. Thermo Alchemist has Defender. You can tap it to ping everyone for 1, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it untaps Thermo Alchemist. Zafahi Thunder Conductor. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, scry 1. If that spell's mana value is 5 or greater, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. And if that spell's mana value is 10 or greater, Zafahi Thunder Collector deals 10 damage to an opponent chosen at random. So with Zafi, or with him anyways, more than likely you're always going to get the scry. More than likely you're going to get the creature token. But there are quite a few X spells to where you can easily hit the 10 extra damage just flung somewhere. Most people probably won't remove him just because it's very hard for them to actually see him be a threat, but he can be a threat very easily in this deck, depending on what cards we have in our hands. Alright, so let's go on to the main dish, the target practice area. Now usually I have a utility spell section somewhere added into this, but these cards just do such a wide range of things that I didn't really feel like it was necessary to have a utility section. So Blessed Alliance has Escalate 2. You choose 1 or more. Target player gains 4 life, untap up to 2 target creatures, and then target opponent sacrifices an attacking creature. Okay, so this is one thing I definitely want to point out with Blessed Alliance. It makes it a little bit simple. The escalate cost does not actually increase the mana value. So you're only going to get a 2/2 off of Metallurgic Summoning off of Blessed Alliance no matter how much mana you pump into here. That being said, choose either target opponent sacrifices an attacking creature or target player gains 4 life first, because the untapped 2 target creatures just automatically pays for the escalate cost. So you're paying 1 white, nothing, and then another white, or another generic mana for all 4 of those effects, which is absolutely crazy. Call of the Coppercoats is an amazing card. Strive, this card, or the spell costs 1 and a white more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target opponents. Create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. This is commonly called an army in a can for a really good reason. Selecting all 3 of your opponents limits it down to 2 CMC plus another additional 2, makes it 4 CMC to get this effect to its maximum, which is just absolutely bonkers. Comet Storm, X red with multi-kicker 1. Choose any target, then choose another target for each time the spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. With Hinata, that multi-kicker is essentially 0. You might as well choose everything that's on the board that's not yours and just max out your X. And if you're feeling generous, you can also keep 3 back in case there's a spell Purist or something like that. But more than likely, just tap everything, target everything for absolutely free, and just nuke the board and also burn your opponents for a huge amount of mana. It's absolutely crazy with Hinata. Crush Contraband. Choose one or both. You're going to choose both. Exile any target artifact and target enchantment. Mostly just want this here for any like Paradox Engine shenanigans, just because I just really do not like that card. And it's a 2 CMC card just to get rid of 2 problematic board states. Disenchant, just again, a really cheap way to hate on combo pieces more than anything. I also have Disorder in the Court here. Just want to reiterate how good of a card this is and how versatile it can be. Can be used for alpha strikes, can also be used for protecting your stuff, or it can be used to protect an opponent if you're really into that political kind of shenanigans on that. And it just gives you a ton of investigate tokens, that's all, or clue tokens. Eerie Interlude, just a really good card. I would mostly use this to protect yourself, protect your creatures from removal spells or a board wipe. Exile any number of target creatures you control, return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. You might as well select your entire board if you're not going to get attacked that turn. That way it keeps you from, number 1, it protects your entire board, and then number 2, it only costs 1 CMC and it will never increase in price. Ghostly Flicker, exile 2 target artifact creatures and or lands you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under your control. Again, this is going to cost 1 CMC with Hinata. Absolutely crazy amount of value off of that. Glimpse of the Sun God, X and white. Tap X target creatures, scry 1. Again, use this right before your opponent ends his turn, and then it's your turn. Alpha strike to whatever you want to hit, and no one can really do anything. It's a 1 white mana alpha strike for free, pretty much. And then Gridlock is the exact same, except it's non-land permanent. So anyone who has any mana rocks that are still sitting open or any utility artifacts, just might as well tap those 2 and just not deal with it. Heliod's Intervention is a very great card in this deck. Choose one, destroy X target artifacts and or enchantments. Target player gains twice X life. You'll never choose that second part. You might as well destroy every single artifact and enchantment that you don't control for 2 CMC with Hinata on the field. It's absolutely bonkers, and I would highly recommend running Heliod's Intervention with any Hinata deck. Next up is Icy Blast, X and a blue. Tap X creatures, and if you control a creature with 4 or greater, those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. Hinata just happens to have a power and toughness of 4. So this might as well tap everyone's creatures, no matter what. Get in a 100% alpha strike for absolutely free. And then next time you get to alpha strike again on your next turn with a little bit of repercussions depending on how many players are still in the game at that point. Absolutely crazy card, absolutely love all 4 of these cards in a Hinata deck. They do just so much work. Keep safe, counter target spell that targets a permanent you control. You draw a card. It's a 1 CMC counter spell. Magma Opus, again, just insane card value for just 2 CMC. And then March of the Swirling Mist. X and a blue. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may exile any number of blue cards from your hand. The spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exile this way, and then up to X target creatures phase out. And they don't come back till the next untap step for that controller. So what you could do is before their attack step, phase out everything and then alpha strike him at the beginning of your next turn. Just a really cheeky way to just really ruin someone's day because they can't even do anything on their attack step, and then you just punish them even more with an alpha strike. Prismatic Boon is a X white blue. X target creatures gain protection from a single color of your choice until end of turn. You can use this in a little bit of variety of different ways. You can use this as a kind of a crackback protection and just target your whole board and then block with absolutely 0 repercussions. You can also attack with this by using this before they declare their blockers, and then you can just alpha strike with 0 repercussions on that, or you can use it as, protecting your board, which you might be the bad guy with this deck. Just going to put that out there. You're probably going to be using it to protect yourself, but it does have options, and I do want to sell all the options that you have with this card. Now, something that I want to point out, since I have Magma Opus and March of the Swirling Mist, the CMC for Magma Opus, even with Hinata's cost reduction, is going to be an 8 CMC card. So you're always going to get your 8 construct off of Metallurgic Summonings. That's always going to be a thing. Next up is March of the Swirling Mist. Since it has an X value into it, whatever you choose that X value to be, +1 is going to be the CMC value. So if you target everything on the board and you have a Metallurgic Summonings and it's right before your turn, you can summon a 20/20 construct right before your untap step. Is just absolutely bonkers. Again, same with Prismatic Boon. The only one I don't have here is like the Escalate effect, where that CMC is always going to remain at whatever the card says on the top, even if you are paying into it. I'll link a Magic the Gathering article where they first changed from CMC to spell mana value. They did an article on that and broke down the rules on that, and I'll link that in the description as well, in case anyone has any questions regarding it. Next up, we have Reality Shift. Exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library. Just, again, really good spot removal. Reality Spasm. X, blue, choose one. Tap X permanent or untap X target permanent. I really wish it was titled tap or untap X target permanents, but I feel like that would just be absolutely broken at that point, especially with this deck. So I'm okay getting in either free alpha strikes or protecting yourself on a crackback for alpha striking. Again, just a really good card, and Hinata makes any X spell just absolutely free. Semester's End. Exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers you control at the beginning of the next end step. Return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker. So this is a really good protection spell, more than anything. Again, it's going to be 1 CMC with Hinata on the field, and they come back bigger. And if you're looking at upgrading this deck, maybe adding a planeswalker or two, this will help you in that regards too, because at least your planeswalkers also getting the protection, and they also get just an additional loyalty counter for free. Marshal's Anthem is a really good enchantment. 2 white with multi-kicker, 1 and a white. Creatures you control get +1/+1. When Marshal's Anthem enters the battlefield, return up to X target creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of times Marshal's Anthem was kicked. You're going to be paying an additional white if you have Hinata on the field, which is absolutely crazy. And the fact that it does have to cost a white and not a generic is the only downside of this card. You can get your ping effects back. You can get your some of your creature token factories. You can just get whatever you want, honestly. This card is just really, really good, especially with Hinata. And that's why I love Hinata on these decks. I just absolutely love this deck so far, just because of the crazy stuff you can do. Aether Gale returns 6 non-land permanents to their owner's hands. You can use this as a political tool to help someone get a really good enter the battlefield trigger again, if that's what you want to do. More than likely, you'll be removing the 6 biggest threats on the board for 2 CMC. Barrel's Expertise. Return up to 3 target artifacts and or creatures to their owner's hand, and then you may cast a card with converted mana cost 4 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. To pay 2 CMC to bounce the 3 biggest threats on the field, and then play something in your hand that costs 4 or less for absolutely free is insane value. But not as much as the next 2. By Force, X red, destroy X target artifacts, nuke the entire board besides your artifacts for 1 red mana. Absolutely crazy value. Insane value off of that 1 card. Curse of the Swine ends up being a 2 CMC card, or cost card. Exile X target creatures. For each creature exiled this way, its controller gets a 2/2 green boar creature token. Unless for some reason your opponent is running boar tribal, I don't see why not just to select everything that's on the board. Even if it's like human tokens, because at least a human deck will have human-based strategy or synergies, not boar-based strategies. So there's almost no reason just to select every creature that's not on your side of the board to remove. It's just insane value off of this card. Distorting Wake. X blue, blue, blue. Mana requirement on this one is a little bit more intense than what it usually is in this deck, but return X target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. For 3 CMC, Cyclonic Rift everyone. It's just that good. It's just that good. That's all I have to say with this one. Launch the Fleet. A single white mana. It has a strive cost of 1 to cast for each target beyond the first until end of turn. Any number of target creatures gain whenever this creature attacks. Put a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. 1 CMC, double your side of the field. And it just helps that much more with an Alpha Strike. Can you imagine an Alpha Strike with like 10, 15 creatures? plus tokens, and then you just double the amount of creatures you have on the battlefield attacking on an alpha strike, there's no one's going to recover from this. Mass manipulation, XX, blue, 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 blue. Gain control of X target creatures and or planeswalkers. So it is a 4 cost card, but with Hinata's reduction, you're going to only have to pay 1 additional mana to gain the targets, if that makes sense. So instead of paying 2 to grab 1, you're just paying the 1. Instead of grabbing or paying 4 to pay or to grab 2, you're just paying the 2. So it does greatly reduce the cost. It's just not as much as it feels like it should be with Hinata, which is a very weird thing because you're also reducing the cost of this card by a lot. It's just not as much as you're used to. Soulfire Eruption. Choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, and or players. For each of them, exile the top card of your library. Then Soulfire Eruption deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to that permanent or player. You may play the exiled cards until the end of your next turn. You might as well target the players and then maybe at minimum the 3 biggest threats on the board or 3 key utility creatures that you just want gone. You might hit a land, that does suck, but more than likely you're going to hit something and at least get some value into it. And on the worst comes to worst, you just get 6 cards deeper into your deck for 3 mana, and you can play those up until you're in phase on your next turn. So you get an entire round access to the cards that you dug deep for with this card. It's just really good value, again, for just 3 CMC. Release the Gremlins, XX red, destroy X target artifacts, create X 2/2 red gremlin creature tokens. Again, the same thing with mass manipulation. It almost feels like you're paying too much for this compared to by force, but at least you get the gremlin creature tokens as well. So let's just say you hit 4 artifacts. Instead of having to pay 9 mana for this, you pay 5. It's still quite a bit, but you almost feel, how should I say, greedy at this point with playing Hinata. It's like, it still feels good, but not as great as a by force. Reconstruct history. Return up to 1 target artifact, 1 target enchantment, 1 target instant, 1 target sorcery, 1 target planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand, and then you exile Reconstruct history. Again, just a 2 CMC card. Get your best spells, get your best creatures, best enchantments, and if you do upgrade this deck, you can throw in a planeswalker or 2, and there you go. There's your recursion. Now, everything being said, between by force, Heliod's Intervention, and this next card, Rolling Thunder, those 3 cards are probably the best cards in this deck. Absolutely crazy value off of Rolling Thunder. X red red. Rolling Thunder deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. So, since you choose how the damage is dealt, choose everything on the board. Everything on the board. You choose Hinata, you choose all your creatures, you choose all your artifacts, you choose all their creatures, all their artifacts, all their enchantments, all their sagas, all their planeswalkers, everything, even their lands. So you are at lands by turn 6. Let's just say 6. No one's probably going to be missing a land drop by turn 6. And if they are, then they have other things on the board. So 6, nothing else is on the board. You play a Rolling Thunder. You hit each person for 8 damage. Because 6 times 4 is 24, divided by 3, 8 damage to everyone. That is like bare minimum Rolling Thunder. You have someone who plays creature tokens, or someone who's pumping out artifacts, or someone who's just a green player in general. You're going to be hitting everyone for a massive amount of damage, and this is how you take someone out very quickly. You can either take out the biggest threat, or divide it equally, or just like preemptively lower everyone's abilities to just be taken out the next turn by ping effects. This card just does so much. I absolutely love this card. I love the fact that the damage is dealt how you choose, and it can be among any target permanents. It doesn't have to say non-land permanents. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely love this card. Smoke Spirit's Aid, X and a red. For each up to X target creatures, create a red aura enchantment token named Smoke Blessing attached to that creature. Those tokens have enchant creature, and when enchanted creature dies, it deals 1 damage to its controller, and you create a treasure token. More than likely, you're just going to be using this on your opponent's creatures, and then that, preferably before like a Rolling Thunder or a Comet Storm, and then just increasing the amount of damage that is dealt to their controller is more than likely what you're going to end up doing with this card. But worst case scenario, you could put it on your own creatures if you're willing to risk that damage to get a little bit more mana. But Hinata should give you enough mana to not really have to worry about that. Last 2 cards here are kind of interesting ones. Another one is Twin Flame. Twin Flame has Strive. It costs 2 and a red more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target creatures you control. For each of them, put a token that's a copy of that creature onto the battlefield. Those tokens have haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. A really, really good card. Just slightly disappointing for the cost for this deck. So your first one is just a red mana, and then beyond that, it's going to be 2 CMC on that. So if you target 3 creatures, you're paying 5 mana instead of, wow, math is hard, 8 CMC. So it does save you quite a bit, and the more you use it, the more it will save you. It just, like I said, you get greedy with Hinata. It's a great card. I'm not saying it's not. It just feels a little bit disappointed compared to some of the other things that you can do with this deck. Wave of Indifference is another Alpha Strike enabler. X target creatures can't block this turn. It's not as good as tapping them down not permanently, but tapping them down, because it doesn't open them up for other people to attack as well. But it's an Alpha Strike for 1 CMC in this deck, and it's absolutely bonkers. Okay, so we're going to get into the value of this deck. How? Okay, anyways. TCG player without shipping was $49.52, and the shipping on it was $16.82. I try to keep my commander decks under $50, and I'm not really counting shipping on TCG player. You can get some really good deals off of that, and that's where I set my budget on. I don't know if TCG Player actually came out with an update recently or updated their optimizer, but it works so much smoother than it has in the past. I clicked on it, gave me a little percent icon the entire time, knew exactly how long I was waiting on it, and it just worked beautifully. Could not recommend TCG Player more at this point, just because their optimizer is actually fixed. It actually works on commander decks, and I could not be happier. Card Kingdom came out to $79.73. Card Kingdom is also just a really great option. sends it all in one package instead of the 4 or 5 to 10 that you might get with TCG Player. So if you want your deck to arrive all at once instead of by piecemeal, they're your go-to people. The average cost for Card Kingdom ended up being over $615. So if you go by TCG Player cost to compare to the average, we're sitting around 8 to 9%. And if you're looking at Card Kingdom, we're looking at somewhere roughly around 12 to 15% rough estimate on that one. I say that's a really good job budget-wise. This card, or these decks just do really, really well for the $50 that you pay for it. And just to do some absolutely bonkers stuff with Hinata is insane. That being said, I did look at some of the average decks that people have been making, and they're including Esper Sentinel and Dockside Extortionist and stuff like that. And while those are really great cards, to have a card like By Force or Heliod's Intervention, something that costs $2, be so much more impactful off of a unique commander than a high tier commander staple, just makes me feel so much better about using these budget decks to create these things instead of just filling it with CDH cards, if that makes sense. So there are a few pricey cards that you might want to cut from this deck if this isn't quite in your budget. Number one is Magma Opus. I believe it's like a $6 or $8 card. Same with Sublime Epiphany. As great as those cards are, I would possibly cut those cards out and just go with another big X burn spell that might target multiple creatures, or just look at something that has the words target and an X in the mana cost, and that's what I would use to replace those. Just because while they are great cards in this deck, I'm not sure if it's quite worth that price budget. The reason why they can still fit into this price budget is that Hinata uses cards that no other commander can really actually use, especially to the extent that Hinata can. No one is playing By Force with the objective of nuking all the artifacts on the board for one CMC. No one is playing Heliod's Intervention to get everything off the board, artifact and enchantment, for 2 CMC. And just the fact that we can use, no one can end the game with a Rolling Thunder for 40 plus damage to each player. The things that you can do with Hinata, no one else can do, and I very much appreciate that. So the fact that no one really plays those cards as much as the staples, obviously, that would mean that we can fit some of these more expensive cards into the budget. So that's what I did here. Now, before I get sidetracked, let's get on to the lore. So Hinata is a Kirin spirit of Kamigawa. They play tricks on the mortals, which is a very entertaining thing, in my opinion. And Hinata is by far the most troublesome Kirin. She plays constant tricks on the mortals, and she's often called the impertinent and the one who bothers. So the Kirin have like a very unique way of looking at it. They see it as giving gifts that the mortals deserve. That's how they see their tricks. So it's very entertaining how just the way that they look at it. Like I'm not 100% sure on this, but if you're more of a jerk, then the harsher the trick they play on you, and that's how they determined that's what the mortals deserve. That's just my personal headcanon on it. To me, it makes sense based on what has been demonstrated. And the other spirit Kirans love Hinata's actions so much that they actively encourage her and support her whenever they can. Which I just find funny. Hinata's just a giant practical joker who's just out to make her and her friends laugh the whole time. That's literally her entire lore. And that being said, let's go into the wrap up. So, like I said, this is the deck. 8% of the budget, or 8% of the average deck if you're looking at TCG player, around 12 to 15% if you're looking at Card Kingdom. Just a really efficient and mean deck for what you're doing. You can build Hinata in such a variety of different ways. I chose the more fun for my play style, which is not necessarily hurting my opponents with taxing, but to just get insane value off of that first line of text. You could have built this around just countering everything at a reduced cost, or you could have just built this around at like a taxing deck. But I'm personally not a fan of those. Those are options for Hinata decks, and who's to say what's the best actual way of doing things. That being said, thank you guys so much for any of your support. I know that this video took a long time to make. Trust me, this is, I think, my third or fourth time recording this due to all the technical bugs. I also moved during the break between Kodama and Hinata, so had to reset up my office along with the rest of the house, but we should be good to go from here on out. So hopefully I'll continue my normal schedule of every other week roughly. Until then, thank you guys so much for your support. I definitely appreciate it. If you want to like, comment, and subscribe. If you don't want to do that, that is perfectly fair. Again, thank you guys for all your support, and any comments and recommendations I would absolutely appreciate in the comments. Thank you again so much, and have a wonderful day.